Hi. This is going to be a cakewalk after Sophie's presentation. She pretty much like laid the foundation for the whole discussion, I think. That was great.
Should we just go?
Yeah, pretty much. We're done here. We'll just bring her back.
When we say innovation cultures, what does it mean? Does it just mean you're an agency that moves fast? Does it just mean that you're an agency that makes people comfortable about flying drones in the office? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Someone just asked a question about whether or not innovation can be taught. And,
Yeah.
and it really like resonated because I think, that's something within organizations, especially creative agencies that have been doing something the same way for a long time. One is, I think the innovation is in there, right? Creative problem solving is there, business problem solving is in there, but it's a different way of working. And I think that, that's kind of creating a culture of innovation takes the things that Sophie was talking about and says, okay, we're people that typically like a big reveal, right? Like a big ta-da moment, here's your amazing campaign.
Yep.
And what she was saying is this practice, and that's a totally different, I think, mindset to working.
Yeah, and I mean, I come from a traditional agency, and so we don't necessarily have that DNA of innovation like a Razorfish or Huge or a lot of other places. So for us, it has been about creating that culture over time, and that as we built out our digital capabilities, because that's kind of inherently tied. But to your point, creatives are inherently innovative. That's sort of what we hire them to do, and what they're charged to do. And it's, part of it is just giving them the tools and surrounding them in osmosis of just sort of letting them know what's possible and sort of practice. And I agree with everything that Sophie was saying around that.
I want to come back and talk about traditional agencies and how much harder it can be to bake that culture in. But you mentioned creatives. I mean, isn't creating an innovation culture about making sure that is outside the creative department? Because I mean, creatives are innovative. That's what they're paid to do.
And we don't believe in a siloed lab. And I know that's sort of from a lot of discussions over the last few days. Everyone's like, oh, we have our lab, we have our dedicated team, and that's our lab team. And frankly, we just don't have the luxury to have a dedicated team that's just off there tinkering and sort of not having billable hours. Our approach to innovation is not to segment and silo and have those toys. And not that we don't have the toys, but it's about, our approach is, let's take a new technology, be it beacons, drones, 3D printing, pick one of the buzzwords of the year, and sort of saying, okay, go discover, play, and that, but take a team of creatives, user experience, account, strategy, and developers and tech people, and go off, form a team that their job is to go off, experiment, research, discover, come back with some ideas, practical ideas of how we can use that technology that might actually aid a client, so not just all fun, just for shits and giggles stuff, but actually usable approach, present back some ideas. Executive team will pick sort of the one we want to go with, and then let's go prototype that, and prototype and have an actual working version of that we can then experiment and play with.
You mentioned, drones, and then there's 3D printing. Cam, give me an example of a time you spent some money and time on a certain piece of technology and found that it was just an utter waste of time.
Oh goodness, I think there are, you bring up a different point, not specifically a specific technology, but that idea of working with a technology first, right? So the brief is, here's something cool, and like we were talking about, like beacons, right? Hey everyone, like figure something out around beacons, and then let's try to wrap a business problem sort of around that. And what Sophie was saying, and when I was thinking about times where innovation, I think, has actually been very fruitful, is when we did start with a business problem first. And when we also kind of like worked in stealth mode in the background to see if something would work. So it was almost the sort of practicing was happening behind the scenes. So I was just thinking, we did a project for Esurance called Fuelcaster, and that was one where, again, we were working to see if the technology would work, and it was not a dramatic technology like a drone or a beacon. It was just like putting a whole bunch of data together to do some predictive algorithms, and it was useful because it solved a specific business problem that Esurance had. So, I think you need both, right? You need to be like practicing with technology in the background so that if someone comes and says, I can solve this business problem, but I need this technology, you can say, well, we've looked at that, and we know, how to use an API that can do these things. So, you need to have your technologist in really good kind of like fighting shape. And so in that way, I always think of it as kind of like when you're training athletes, they're just running stadium stairs. And that's what doing those
exactly
experiments
the reason
are.
for it. I mean, one of the questions was around time. And time is, when it comes to innovation specifically, it's the biggest barrier to actually be able to do stuff. And that because that's, our briefs now are insane. And you can do what you've done before, you can do again sort of in a crazy 6-week timeline from brief to end market. But when it's trying to do something new in that's when you're scared. So to the point of if you've trained and if you've done something or experimented with stuff and know that you can actually do it, you might not have done it for a client yet, but you've got that at your disposal. But I absolutely agree. It always starts with a business problem and that idea and then to solve it, but it's about knowing the technology behind the scenes for when that occurs.
I still want to know a time it failed, though, because I think the fail thing is, Sophie mentioned, I mean, it happens. You spend a lot of time on this innovation, whether it's a technology or whatever it is, and just figure out that was not worth the effort.
Well, I was actually thinking about it as we were talking. I think, there was a time, and I'm hoping that time has kind of come and gone, right? With like facial recognition. Remember, upload your face. Like everything had that moment. And that was one where it's like, you can kind of do it and it kind of works, but there are boundaries, and it takes a long time to get that kind of like algorithm working and all that stuff. And that was something where I felt like, the investments going into that were not necessarily yielding that return, but everyone felt like it was automatic. Like, yes, of course you can upload a picture of a person and you can have, technology that can recognize them, and then you could put like a mustache on them or whatever those things were, So I think that was a good example where, hopefully we've moved on from those kind of things.
Yeah, I want to go back to creating that culture of innovation in an agency that's not was it really created for that, the traditional agency, the big agency? What are some of the things you come up against and that aren't just like, oh, it's siloed and nobody knows what's going on? I mean, is it a question of, is it holding company stuff?
No, I don't think, they're holding company challenge, but I don't think that's what prevents you from doing that. Part of it, it's a lot of things, so let me try to parcel it. One is obviously bringing those capabilities in-house and having, obviously, as any agency has to strongly building out your digital capabilities over the years for the new needs, and that is sort of creating that capability in-house. And then it is a lot of education and training. I mean, we have, and also the theory and the reality of the people in that are two different things. Like, we can have a theory and approach of innovation, and we have a lot of creatives and people in the agency that absolutely embrace it and love it and raise their hand and want to be part of it. And then you have some people that are still a little stuck in the past. And
what do you do? Do you fire them?
No, because they're still great at what they do. And every account and every project is different. So you just find the right projects and the right accounts and that for them to fit in. If they're great at what they do, you're not going to fire them just because of that. But you need to sort of take everyone's strengths and sort of work around them a little bit.
One of the things I found, I had the opportunity to work at JWT New York, which is kind of a super kind of old school traditional organization. And I've worked at some other places as well, and I think one of the biggest challenges at JWT was they had a period of scorched earth, right, where they embraced like innovation and they embraced technology, and they brought these huge ideas to a bunch of their clients, and they went south. They didn't have kind of control over it. It's like when you're flying a drone and you don't kind of, and so those account people were like, never again. I am never bringing these things again. So I think that is another thing too, when you're on your second or third cycle, where maybe you've been practicing and maybe not the right way, where you actually have to kind of course correct what innovation means and all of those things. So that was super challenging.
What happened? I mean, was it just a question of not knowing what was going on? Or?
Well, I think we all made a lot of mistakes, right, in the beginning of kind of like interactive, brand work that we were doing. So there's probably no one here that's been doing digital that hasn't had something not work out, right? That's the nature of the practice and all that stuff. What we've learned to do better is to set expectations, right? So we did something called Pop Secret Labs. So like in its very name, you're kind of communicating that this is, small batch. We're going to do a lot of them. Versus, again, what account people were used to back in the day is still a big reveal, a big bang. And we all know that like with that big bang is like tears and heartache, So, we've had to also coach, I think, people that communicate and set expectations with clients like, keep this
just
on
call it a lab.
Keep this on the DL. Yeah, like let's
call it the experiment.
Yeah. So I think that's been, again, that's how we've learned. And one of the things we always say is like, as much as like innovation and technology need to, kind of be infused into an organization, we as technologists and nerds need to also get that ad agency, big reveal, kind of a little bit of theater.
Totally, which
and
we
make
love.
our
Yeah.
stuff better, because we can have like a kernel of an idea, but when you bring people in that can kind of create products and package things correctly, that's when it becomes, I think, really unstoppable. So building that two-way street is like the next,
Totally.
the next step.
Yeah. You have sort of different approaches to innovation inside your agencies. I mean, Deutsch has sort of been like a fan of the lab approach. You guys aren't. Sort of what is your approach? Like, how do you?
So we'll literally, if there's new technology, and we'll do it kind of every quarter or 6 months, depending on that, we'll literally send out either an all staff or a select email saying, look, we got this new technology that we want to tackle. Who wants to be part of the SWAT team in that? And so it's hand raising, and it's over and above your current core jobs, just like new business, it's your night job and you've got your day job as well. But that stems from people that are actually passionate about technology or about that specific technology and want to be part of it. And then we literally brief them in and we give them a hard date to say, you got to come back with 3 different ideas of how to use this technology in a real world applicable setting.
With a current client?
Knowing our current client base.
Okay.
So you pick any client in that. Obviously, certain clients will be certainly relevant. And then sort of we'll set a hard date, whether that's 10 days, 30 days, depending on we'll have a bit more understanding of the workload. And we'll say you got to hit that date and come back with a presentation. They come back, pick which one we want to go, and then say you got another 30 days to actually build a working prototype. And then come back, and it's a hard date, and it's a real project and a real
like an assignment.
And that it's just like anything else. The only exception is it's not billable, and it can't take the place of your client commitments.
Right. Whereas you guys kind of really parse it out separately.
And we developed a very specific sort of invention practice. Right. I think there are certain types of people that we want to bring into ad agencies that are different, right? That come from different experiences, whether it's product development. And I think there is a time where incubation is needed. A different creative process. And that might not be permanent or something that we do forever. But I think in that time and place, in order to attract people that come in with a different creative process, kind of what Sophie was talking about. A traditional agency is, there's research, there's insights, you get a brief, and then the first creative presentation is usually 10 days after, a bunch of creative teams get briefed. So how do we do problem solving in a way that isn't like that? One sheet of paper goes across the desk, a bunch of art directors and copywriters go off, and 4 days later they come back and they get, So again, in order to have a different creative process, I think we sort of beta tested that through our invention practice.
But isn't the hard part then, I mean, you're talking a lot about time. All of this sounds like it takes time, and clients care about time. How do you, this is kind of what I asked Sophie as well, I mean, how do you communicate to them that this is worth it in the long run? Because, I mean, not every client is like that. There are old, traditional, bureaucratic clients out there that just do not think this is a worthwhile investment, but you maybe know better. You sound like you look like you've experienced it.
We've all experienced it. I mean, we've all experienced it. We got this killer idea, and fuck, this is going to change the world, and it's going to win us awards, and really fundamentally think this is great for the client, but they don't buy it. And it's heartbreaking and depressing and all of that. But, first, I always say you got to be empathetic to your clients, and we all say, fuck clients, how great this would be if we didn't have clients and that sort of thing. But they are our clients, and we're here because of them, and we're an agency for them. So, but I have a lot of empathy for them, because at the end of the day, we're not the ones that are putting our jobs on the line when we pick an idea, and we're not the ones that have to answer into our bosses and our bosses' bosses if it doesn't work and that sort of thing. So they're under a lot of pressure, and they're scared, and it's the old adage of you don't get fired for buying IBM. So doing the same traditional approach to campaigns and advertising and marketing, and that generally doesn't get you fired, although in this day and age that arguably is the exact way to get fired. But it's trying to arm them with real rationale and a real substantial argument for them to take to their bosses of why this is the right thing to do, not just because it's cool and it's going to change the world and because you should and that thing, but how do you actually try to, and that doesn't mean to be hard ROI facts, we all know that's always generally impossible to do, but real justification, whether it's tangential examples of why this worked or why we're confident that this is the right thing to do, but just arm them somehow in some manner
But I have noticed that there
justification.
is an increasing, tendency for agencies to just build it first. Just build it. Don't ask for permission. Just go ahead and build it, and they will come. But that means you're investing the time and the resources right up front, and then crossing your fingers and just being like, oh God, I hope he buys it. I mean, are you a fan of that approach?
Well, I mean, I'm definitely a fan of, and this is kind of like everyone's talking about it, right? Which is like investing ahead of need, right? To your point, which is whether you're doing that on your 20% time or whatever, which is learning these technologies and all of those things. But again, I think the further we get away from solving a specific business problem, the harder it's going to be to retrofit that kind of application around a business problem, which is kind of what Sophie was saying, which is, again, we do projects to stay in shape and to learn things that we have to learn on our own dime. We cannot learn on clients' dimes, right? They're not down with that, and it usually ends badly. So I think we have to, have these practice projects, which might be what that is, more of a practice project, and then we can go to them with a business problem, a reason why, and a beautiful package. And I think when
But still just the idea. Don't actually.
or we did a prototype, or
Maybe
we
just a
have
prototype.
something that's given us some sort of benchmark, which is like, we did
Exactly.
something internally and it took us 10 days. We want to do this for you, and we think it's going to take 30 because we're going to do 2 extra things, or whatever that is. But it used to be that we would go in with like no idea how to do it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Is it? That's
No,
the
I
same thing?
totally agree. And that's, I mean, all that stuff in the background, it's not that we're trying to start tactic first or that sort of thing. It's just to have that training and that practice and that so that when the time comes, we know how to do it. But we try not to, it's the old adage, if you got a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. Like, we try not to have that approach for sure. Everything is custom to the brief and to the challenge. But at the same time, nowadays, there's so many different tools at our disposal. And that's the thing. You need to be, in my mind, you need to be fluent in all of them. So it's just a case of making sure that you are.
I think one of the things that's kind of helping continue a culture of innovation on our client side is now this idea of sort of brands being always on. So we had a lot of clients that they would do like 2 campaigns a year, right? A bunch of TV and a bunch of print. But now with social, they need more things to talk about, right?
Yeah.
So to some extent, that's helping us because it's like we can make little things
And
to
see if
talk
it
about. And if we pour gas on it and if it takes off, then you can kind of, do that, or things that generate more content. So I find there's increasing appetite, to your point, which is now, again, if you are running kind of omnipresent social content and you're only making 2 spots, like what are you going to put in the rest of
Right.
the,
So that pressure on them is
10
actually
months?
Yeah, I mean,
helping.
Yes.
CP&B, we're talking about how
Right.
they've, 900% increase in the content creation. And that's just a new reality. Like, in the old day, you have 4, 10 different deliverables for a campaign. Now you've got 400. Like, it's ridiculous the amount of stuff that we create, and for the same amount of money, with the same amount of people, and that. So the pressure of being able to do that efficiently, and that is massive. And that innovation isn't just from a development and tech and new technology standpoint, but it's also as it relates to production. At least on our end, it's also exactly as CP&B were saying. It's about finding innovative, efficient way to do production, especially video production, and that with all these new formats and that, you need to figure out how to do Vine videos. You need to do how long format video. Like, all that stuff is also part of innovation in that you need to have a model that is not the traditional model, because the traditional model it doesn't work for that in that scale anymore.
True. We do have a couple of minutes. If there are any questions?
They're mesmerized. The hush.
It's okay. They're all.
We answered it.
One thing that you brought up when in some of our conversations too is around the discipline of innovation. So we were talking
Right.
about how people are like innovation, like experimentation, and what Sophie said and what you said is right, which is you have to find that discipline in your culture. And I think in places where I've seen innovation work well, it's when you've done a good job of identifying your own culture and then leveraging your own thing. So like Deutsch is very business problem driven, right? And so it helps us when we say, okay, if that's our culture, we're going to kind of draft our innovation culture to our core culture, not have like, hey, we're totally business driven, then we're going to say, okay, we're going to be technology, our innovations are going to be around technologies, because they were saying, how does this solve business problems?
And practically speaking, like that thing of give them a deadline. You have 30 days, and if you don't do it, what's...
You have to give them a brief. You have to
Right.
you have to have the same sort of
Just
approach that we
it's
do with
ourselves.
any other
It's
brief,
the
and
only-
that's the thing.
it's the
It's
only
just for ourselves.
No more questions? Questions? All right.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay. So what, according to you, is the next big thing in innovation? You know, virtual reality took everyone over. What's next?
You know,
Yeah, you're the crystal ball.
there's no crystal. I mean, for me, I mean, I agree with Reza's comment that the data, I mean, big data, and that isn't going away. But that to me is a foundational thing that we all need to be investing in and be able to manage. For me, the exciting thing is, and I know this is, I mean, when you talk about next new thing, inherently you're going to pick a buzzword or something.
Yeah.
But for me, it's Internet of Things, and not. I think we're still at the product level right now, where it's like, okay, we got Nest, which is intuitive. You got this, you know, home security. You got garage door openers. If you know, at CES, you've got connected beds. You've got connected kettles. You've got connected toothbrushes and that sort of thing. And those are all really just cool in isolation, and they're just, you know, they're not going to take off in that. But for me, the exciting part is when they can start, when the logic and the personalization and the intuitive, predictive nature can come into it, where it will all truly be connected. And Google and Apple and everybody are investing in being that hub. Because to me, when that logic exists behind it, where it intuitively knows you, and when it knows your path throughout the day and sort of it's already pre-done everything for you, that's when it gets interesting and exciting, because that's when it actually adds value to the consumer's layer. Because right now, being able to turn on my kettle on my phone doesn't really change anything, except I don't have to walk downstairs and hit the button. But when it can turn on the moment I get out of my bed, because it knows that I'm up and knows on a table and tells you the weather as you like, when it can actually plan and predict your lifestyle and your preferences, that's when it gets interesting.
Yeah,
to me.
AI, the next thing.
Yeah, there's another question over there.
So I kind of asked this question earlier, but the same thing. I feel like I come from like a ad network, and then now I'm at an agency. One of the things that I notice about a lot of agencies is when they talk about technology, 90% of the time it's not their technology. It's like when you talk like targeting, most of it is a third-party technology. Beacons, it's a third-party. Most of the stuff that agencies do seem to be brokered, and I guess that's okay. When is I mean, how many agencies are actually saying we're going to have our technology and create something from scratch? And I'm not really seeing that. So whenever anyone talks about innovation to technology, it's always, again, in my experience, it's the best stuff is brokered because there are people specialize in it, and that makes sense from a business standpoint. But when are agencies going to say, let's do something on our own? And obviously, I've seen some agencies buy companies, which I think is a smart move. What's your guys' point of view on all this? You know, kind of what I just said, I guess.
Build it or rent it.
Yeah, I mean, we build a lot of custom software. You know, that's the majority of how we spend our time, sort of on the, you know, development side, right? So, you know, but one of the things that Sophie said is you're kind of designing for the familiar. So again, we want to be drafting, I think, a little bit on people that are sort of, you know, breaking the ice with technologies that people have become familiar with, because it's a large charge for a brand to teach consumer behavior, rather than consumer behavior emerging and for brands to leverage their services sort of in that space.
Yeah, for me, it's always scale. You know what I mean? When it's just a campaign or a project, that obviously we're not going to necessarily make this massive investment for this foundational build if we can just rent or do something. But when you get to the scale where you start seeing this as a theme or that sort of, then you start saying investing in that. But it's also a case of, I mean, I love meeting with innovation vendors and partners and that sort of thing. Because a lot of it is just like saying before, just knowing what's out there and what's possible and that sort of thing. And the old adage of, well, you know, just think it, you know, imagine it, and then you can do it. And creativity is this brought up and thing. That's not often how it works. You have to kind of know what is possible and sort of get inspired by a lot of technologies and that, and know when you can bring them to the table. But I always say when I meet with them, saying, you're not going to hear from me for 6 months, 9 months, and then you're going to get a call or an email saying, how much of this, is this possible, how much, and how fast, and can you get back to me in the next 2 hours?
Yeah.
And that's generally how it is, because you want to know all these things that are at your disposal.
Yeah, you put it in your library.
Totally.
Yeah.
You got this like Rolodex, whether it's in your brain or a literal
can
one,
work.
of all these cool things that are possible, and you're waiting for that brief where it actually, you can actually harness it.
Cool. Well, Pam and Alistair are going to lead one of the 2 breakout sessions, so you can continue the discussion there. So what we're going to do is we're going to have coffee and breakouts outside. So if you want to talk about investing for the future with Shannon Denton of Razorfish, you can go to the Ad Slot Lounge, which is outside. And right next to it is Sophie, Pam, and Alistair are going to lead something on innovation cultures in the Gum Gums Monster Lounge. So come back around 10:45, grab some coffee, and we'll see you out there. Thank you, guys.